Hey, Bob, thanks for joining us today. As we get it started, give us a little background on yourself.
Pat, I went to college a long time ago, and thank you for having me today, by the way. But when I went to college, it was to become a film producer. I wanted to work in Hollywood.
How'd that
It was
work out, huh?
always my dream. Yeah. My uncle was in the industry. So I actually had an in. So I did a bunch of internships and I went to college. I was ready to go and I moved down there. I hurt my leg on my very first job and I ended up having to have two surgeries. And my surgeon was hardcore about it and he just wouldn't do them right away. You needed swelling to go down, things to happen. It took 10 months before I could get these surgeries. During that time, my wife got pregnant. We were living in Beverly Hills in a little apartment, and we just kind of wanted to be home back in our Sacramento area where her parents are, my parents are, and we could go be with family and have a baby. So we did that. And when I got up there, I didn't just want to go and try to get some ordinary job. I'd been working in Hollywood. I'd been having a
Right.
lot of fun. And I ended up going and starting a high speed internet company because there was no high speed internet in the foothills just outside of Sacramento. And I thought that was crazy. This was the year 2000, and there was no DSL, no cable, nothing. So my partner and I went around and figured out wireless internet technologies, built a couple of towers, sent our internet out to households around the area, and ran a business for 14 years that was servicing high speed internet needs in the foothills. During that time, we grew pretty big. I mean, not huge, but for us, we went from zero, nothing, to about 1,200 monthly subscribers that paid us monthly bills. And then in 2013, I sold that company, shut it all down by 2014. And now I'm a financial advisor with Edward Jones, where I've been for about the last 8 years. Actually, we're right at our 8 year mark.
Well, that's an interest. That's I gotta admit, that's the first time I've ever heard somebody go from an acting career, wanting to get into film, into being an entrepreneur and starting up an own business. What was the interest there? I mean, what went? How did you go from that transition from the acting into something like high speed internet? Man, that's a big swing.
To fill a need, really. I There was a gaping hole when we looked to get some internet. So I had film experience, and when one of my good buddies up in Newcastle had a big house that was empty. His mom had just moved to Southern California. The house was empty, and we turned it into a facility where production crews could come from Hollywood and actually use our facility as their base of operations. So we put in high speed internet, copy machines, phone lines, a bunch of different technology that they could use and have right at their fingertips rather than being at the conference room of the Hyatt and renting all the other stuff or the Holiday Inn. As that evolved, there was no internet when we were first doing it. Having no internet led to the next business, which we actually got a couple of film jobs in. We did have like Triple X came to our facilities when they were filming up here, and a couple of commercials came up and used our facilities. But that wasn't the business. The business was there's no internet in this area. And
Right.
that led to filling the need. And that's always been kind of my approach with anything is what need do you have and how can I best fill that? And that seems like a good business to be in.
Yeah, there always has to be that need, right? There's the why. We talked about that, the why,
Mm-hmm.
what got you into what you're doing. What has been your journey as a seller, getting into sales? Where did that begin?
Wow. It's actually funny because in sales, I've always felt like I'm not ever selling. I'm just a solution provider. I just help people find the right solution to their issue, whatever it may be, which, as it turns out, is very much sales. And it started for me when I was in my first job as a busboy at Hungry Hunter. There was a restaurant chain that they would have specials, and there were incentives to the crew. You get like a free appetizer if you sold some. Well, I was a busboy. And so as I was pouring waters, I would mention the special and just say, oh, ask your server about it. It's so great. I just had one. It's fantastic. And then they're asking the server about the special before the server even got there. And servers would tell me, oh my gosh, you're just priming the pump for me. I just am selling more than anybody. And they'd give me the appetizer and I'd get to have a little food as a teenager. But then getting into my business, when you need crews to come and stay at your facility in Hollywood, you have to sell. But then when you need people to buy your high-speed internet, to share the cost and to share the business plan, the vision of having high-speed internet in the foothills, you have to start somewhere. So I started with just influential people. And that was where I found out who was kind of a person in this town. And I talked to them and asked them if they had high-speed internet. And they, of course, didn't. So it's a pretty easy sell when you know the answer is no. And
Right.
you can fill that need. And so I started with the most influential and then went outward in, just trying to get as many people talking about our service and involved with our service as possible. But the sales generation that came from talking to people was never enough to get us to where it was changing the weather, right? We needed to
Right.
change our income. We needed to change our lives a little faster. And that's where it really became reliant on our marketing strategy. And that was my own like plan. I had to implement some type of postcard, right? I had to create a postcard. And that's my first real, I'd say, big sell day was I created a postcard that had a happy face that said broadband good, modem, and it had a big gloomy day with a sad face. And that was it. And I sent it out and we just went crazy. We just started packing in people from every area that we were in. It was just so many people were coming to us and trying to get the internet that it changed the whole scheme of what we were doing. And that little bit, that one little marketing aid changed my salesmanship immediately because now I went from taking or proactively trying to get people involved to receiving active people inquiring about my business. Totally different. And that's something I always encourage. If you can get people calling you, it's a great way to be a salesperson.
Absolutely. And it's strange how marketing and sales are so interchangeable. They're so tied together. And a lot of sellers, even, junior sellers, they don't get the connection. But in your case, marketing is, how you market yourself is how you sell yourself. And that's important. You said something about, which caught my interest, was about talking. When you first started off, you actually went to the influencers, the decision makers. And as sellers, whether you're seasoned, sometimes, a lot of times, even our junior sellers, they don't like to approach what we call in our vertical, the C-suite, the CEOs, the CIOs. Those are very intimidating people to us at first, but you went right for it. What skill set gave you that courage, that confidence?
That's an interesting question. It was more about you had to do it. And I think that was part of I was 25 years old at this time. And when I looked at what I had to do to make this thing start, I had
Right.
to get some of those people to know who I was and know what I had to offer. And if they didn't know, nobody else would care because I had to get it talked about at the business meetings and at the conversations with the people downtown. And I didn't know any of them. This was not my town. This was unfamiliar turf to me. So I had to do it. And I think that's what prompted me is when I looked at what writing out, okay, here's what I need to do. That was the first thing. And so I've always been one to bite off the hardest thing first and try to do that and go get that done. Make sure that that's a check out of your day because that hardest thing is the thing that I may put off. I do tend to procrastinate a little bit. That's something I am guilty of. And in that case, I did it just because I had to. I knew I had to. If I didn't get those people going, I wasn't going to get everything moving forward.
Yeah, when you're the single, contributor to that organization, everything relies
Mm-hmm.
on you, especially if you have employees and you have people that, need to rely on you. You have to make it happen. What was the hardest part of the sale for you in internet? What was the cycle like?
In our business, the cycle became very quick. But what happened is our business evolved and we became solution providers for large entities. And we were bidding against jobs with companies like AT&T and Verizon for these jobs, wireless technology to help companies streamline their facilities. So there's several Fortune 500 companies that we worked with implementing wireless broadband solutions that I was in a room with professional seasoned salesperson And
Right.
I was doing sales cycles that were over a year in the making and bidding and processing. And that's where I found real trouble in the internet game. You want the internet? Yep. Okay. We'll have a guy out there Tuesday. Tuesday at 10 o'clock work? Yep. Okay. Well, with the bigger companies, that's where I found myself really struggling with the sales cycle. They make a decision and you think, oh my gosh, they made a decision because I'm a nimble company. We move quickly. They make a decision. It's 3, 4, 6 months before that PO comes down the pipe, and it's hard to deal with. That was something for me that you have to know. You have to kind of set your expectations early, I think is a big thing with sales cycles. Set the expectation, know where you're going to be with it, because if you are relying on that sale for this month's livelihood, that's not something that can always happen. So sales cycles have always been a wall for me that you have to be able to look over and say, okay, I see it out on the horizon and I know what I'm going for. It just might not be for a year from now.
Right. And that whole, persona that you meet at that level, that customer that you meet and the clients that you meet, the ones that are more what we call in our industry, the more enterprise or more complex accounts that you have to deal with. There's usually multiple decision makers, multiple sales cycles. And I know you went to college and you went to, business administration was pretty high there, but you also had a communications, minor also. Did the communications portion help you out any bit? I'm assuming it did.
Well, everything we do is about communications. You have to communicate with people properly, be able to convey the thoughts that you want them to know. I think that as enterprises change and getting right to the C-suite is not easy to do. Sometimes you may want to, as the salesperson, you might be 28 years old and say, this is what I'm going to go do. And then you realize there are people that are gatekeepers for that person. You're not getting to the C-suite right away. And so for me, it was always identifying people that were able to get to the C-suite and take you up the chain. When you do finally get in that elevator with somebody, it's somebody that's been up there before. If you're talking to the front desk person, that's probably not the person that you're going to really spend the most time with. That's a person you're trying to meet and know and discuss their family. And maybe you get to bring them a baked good next time you come in and hope they enjoy it. But they're not going to put you and take you up there and sit in the meeting with you. So I always try to be with that person that can get you to the next level, because they are the ones that really are the decision maker. If they don't present it, the decision maker can't make a decision. And that's where they make that decision before the decision's made. You have to know if that's the person that's pushing you forward or not. And I think that's very important. Know who you're dealing with and whether they're the person or not.
Right. And we as sellers, no matter where you are in your selling career, junior, seasoned, whatever, a lot of times we fail to recognize that. What do you think the ingredient that you had separated you, from everybody else that got you so easily into that C-suite level?
I always got along with people, Pat. I really have always attributed just being a conversationalist, having a nice, decent conversation, not getting too into the weeds with people as being part of it. But it also is who you're talking to for what reason, right? And however you handle each interaction with people, I think is very important when you walk into a building. If you walk into a building, you don't know whether that person at the front desk is the boss's daughter or best friend or what. You just don't know the pull people have. So it was always for me being respectful, being courteous, being involved, right? If something was going on, you'd say, oh my gosh, it's great that you guys are doing this. This is really an impressive party you're having or gathering or whatever it is you're doing. Involve yourself with it. Let them know what you think of it. And moving past the different levels of who people are and what they can do for you, and to who are you? How are things? I'm Bob. Letting them know me a little bit. I think that always helped. Letting people know me, understand what's going on, but also having solutions that people needed, right? You got a belief in product. You got to know what you have and know that, hey, I can help you here.
Yeah, a lot of times as sellers, we tend to get, when we visit our customers and clients, we're so excited about making that sale, that transactional sale, and it's got to go beyond the transactional state. It has to be something where you have the meeting. We're all involved in meetings all the time, but the meetings need to be turned into conversations with the customer. And the more conversation you have, that's where you get to your point, to the customer's desired outcomes. And a lot of times, as salespeople, we want to have a script. We want to just sell our product or services, but it's not always what the customer wants. We don't really know.
Mm-hmm.
How can we solve a gap? How can we offer a solution when we really haven't got to the point with the customer of what their desired outcomes are? You went from the internet, selling internet hardware and just programs and so on, very competitive vertical to be in, very, the space. Now you went into even a more competitive area with his, financial advising. As a wealth manager, I would assume that trust has to be way on that list with your clients, right?
Yes, I sure hope so. I know it is. I trust them to be honest with me, right? People aren't always honest. I think that's something we all have a little trouble with, especially in our profession. Being a salesperson, you're trying to provide the right solution for people. And if they don't give you accurate, truthful information, it's a lot harder to perform that properly. So trust goes both ways in my business and probably yours as well. But yeah, when I'm dealing with people, I'm not trying to sell them anything, right? I always have to deal with the markets that where they are today. Like right now, I could be the
Right.
best salesman in the world and people aren't all that thrilled with me, Pat. The market and the economy are down. There's worry on the street. There's fear. And so you have to be confident, A, in your plan, right? That I've done what I needed to do to set you up for this downturn, and that you're set up to recover properly throughout the downturn. And so I have to be able to convey both of those themes, that we've already done a lot of the work, that we're not as bad off as we should be, but we also are headed towards a better position here in the future. That is just all about trust, because they're trusting me to read analysts' information correctly. They're trusting me to read their personal situation accurately. And that is very much about trust. And I think that is something I've always leaned on, is that I am, in my opinion, a pretty quality person. I'm going to help. I'm going to do what's right as best I can, but I'm also going to do what's right for my firm and for my family. And so I think that at the end, the word that I always strive for is fair. Everything that I try to accomplish is going to be fair for myself and my clients.
That is a very interesting nugget you just dropped there. I love the fact that, a lot of times in our industry, we talk to customers and we're always talking about, their needs. But a lot of times customers don't really know what they don't know. They don't know exactly what they want, what their gap is, what their concerns are yet. And trust, we always talk about trust on our end. We have to build trust, credibility, rapport, respect for the customer. But it's interesting how we should also expect that from our customers too, right? When you say trust with your clients, what are you looking for as far as trust on their end?
Honesty, Pat. So you'll find out in our business, any financial advisor you ever deal with wants every dollar you ever have, right?
Nature of the
That's,
game, right?
that's the nature of the game. That's how we make money, is by working with your money to make money. Well, because of that, people get guarded. They talk about their 401k. They say, here's my 401k over here. Here's this, here's that. And I say, okay, great. You have $600,000. You're fantastic. You're in a great position here. What else? And they forget about the CDs over at Safe Credit Union. And they don't want to talk about it because that's their safe money. That's their, I'm not getting involved money with that. That is not for you, buddy. You don't get to take me and sell that on me. Well, I'm not a salesperson. I'm a solution provider. Let me do better with the same solution that you have going if I can. If I can't, the money will stay in the bank. So first off, it's about the information they give you. I have to trust them to give me all of the information. Sometimes people flat out don't. And I had a client flat out lie about her budget so that I would give her the green light to retire. And well, 3 years later, she's like, turns out I spend more than I thought. And okay, great. Then that's why you're depleting your money too quickly. And that's why you shouldn't have retired when you did at 62 instead of 65. So that dishonesty didn't hurt me. It's going to hurt her. And it really is. And it's something that nobody wants to go back to work at 68 after being retired for 8 years.
Exactly. And that's one of the things that happens a lot in our industry, is that we try to avoid with our customers the blind spots. Every time you go into a relationship, new relationship, even one you've had for a long time with a customer, there's always going to be blind spots. And I am a firm believer that as sellers, we need to dig deep on those blind spots. And that goes with asking the right questions. Do you believe in that? I mean, I think it's more than just asking a question, as it is really getting down to the root cause.
It's two parts though. It's two parts. It's asking the right question. And you asked if I believe in that. That is my job, is to ask the right questions, to get the right information. But then the second part is listening.
Right.
You can ask all the questions you want. If you're not listening, you're not hearing the true meaning of what they're trying to tell you. And I think that that's something I'm even learning better. I'm trying to do better and better every day. It's something on my daily checklist. If I'm sitting with a client, I want to be listening, not writing, not talking, not interrupting, not thinking about how I have the same story, like I would with my friends. And I'm a storyteller. I like to share my story too. So how your friend's telling you their story, it triggers something in your mind. You're out of their story. Well, in business, you get your mind triggered and you're thinking about something else. You may miss the key morsel that's going to be the connection between you and that person. And so really active listening, you have to ask questions. You have to get to the bottom of it. But you also have to realize every question you ask, people get defensive, people defend. And in a client situation where you've already earned the trust, you've already earned the rapport, it's really easy. And that's a lot of where I am these days. But when I'm with somebody new that is coming in for their kind of review of what they're doing outside of my book, right, to see if maybe they would work with me, you ask too many pointed questions, they get a little defensive. So you have to listen and get to know that person before you ask the perfect questions that'll, get this thing home, because people can get a little put off by what you're saying. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. The way you deal with that is that, like you said, you don't make it an interrogation, right? Put the spotlight behind them. Hey, I'm going to ask you 50 questions. I'm not going to, let you come up for air or anything. I'm going to just keep asking the questions. So you have to, very early on in my career, this is funny, this is a story. I had a new sales leader ride with me in the car, and we went out for the day, and I was so excited. I had the happy years on as a salesman. I went in there, pitched the account, and I was rolling all day long. And at the end of the day, he goes, I got to tell you something. He goes, you're one of the, Pat, you're one of the best transactional salespeople I've ever seen. And I went, I know that, and I'm good at what I do. And he goes, that was not a compliment. I went, what are you talking about? He goes, you spent more time talking and interrogating the customer. You didn't really get, and you left so much on the table that you could have brought to our organization, but you were so interested in getting your point across and tell them, how big and bad the company is and we're the greatest. You didn't listen. And to your point, you have to listen and not only ask questions, but ask the right questions. Mm-hmm. What do you think? Why do you think that happens to us as salespeople when we're doing that?
Asking the wrong questions?
Yeah.
Or, yeah. Have you ever heard the saying, it worked so well, I stopped doing it?
Yeah, lots of times.
It's weird because I often wonder, I think about the things that have worked for me to push the needle over the years, over my lifetime. There are so many things that have worked that right now I don't do. And so having a conversation like this actually kind of brings you back. I think that what I think we should all focus on is the fundamentals of relationships. And if you focus on the fundamental of the relationship you're forming, if it's a business to business relationship where you're going to be dealing with 5 different people, you need to know that. Make it quick, get in there, do what you got to do, make sure they know your product availability, make sure you know your service availability, and go from there. If it's a one-on-one deal, you need to bring a little different game and a different conversation. And I think that's where we have one conversation with somebody and personalities start getting into the mix, and we shift away from just the 5 fundamentals we should be doing every single time. And we forget they're in there, but they aren't as professional or as aligned with our goal as they always had been when we were scripted and we weren't as good at what we do and as thorough, right? Think of the product knowledge. As time goes on, you know your product so much better, you involve yourself so much more. I think it starts getting taken for granted. If I was to answer why we go away from what works so well, it would be because we start taking it for granted and think it's what we're always doing.
Right. Exactly. And the whole take it for granted. I do this all the time. I know what I'm doing. I've done it, the same way 20 years. Well, coming out of the pandemic, things have changed a lot in this industry. And people don't realize, and this is something interesting that came up in one of the meetings I had recently, is that over the last 2-3 years prior, pre-pandemic, you may have dealt with certain customers you dealt with for years. After the pandemic, some of those people were replaced by, the next generation coming up. And there was a big pivot as far as how they purchase, how they buy versus the old school way. And you can't take for granted every day of your life, what worked yesterday will work today. You mentioned about the 5 dimensions or 5 things that you look for, as far as with salespeople. We always talk about, pain, finding out the customer's pain, their desired outcomes. We talk about power. Are you talking to the right decision maker in that organization? Value. Do you show value to your customer rather than just talking all the time? Are you showing some type of value? And vision. Does your vision align with the customer? And the other one is consensus. Can you have consensus to the organization, especially with what we call the enterprise accounts, the more complex ones, 7, 8, 9 people, decision makers in those large customers. You have to make sure that you get a consensus. The guy that you're talking about may love what you're selling, but is everybody else in the organization going to love what you're trying to present to them, right? Mm-hmm. So I think having the right mindset is important too. Do you have a sales process that you use whenever you're talking to your clients? Is there a process you go through, or is it just something everybody's individual?
A little of both. I have a process that I always use that is as much about the back office support, because I believe the more information that you can track about people and understand about people and know about people and have at your fingertips is helpful. And if you can convey that information into your notes in a way that is not, you have to read a novel to understand what happened, then that's a big deal. So in our process, when we're doing for example, meeting a new client from start to finish, I have a very defined process that actually has timelines and has everything in it. Now, what words are spoken to that person are going to vary. I'm not going to read the same script because each situation is going to be different. Their need is going to be different. But overall, I follow the same timelines all the way down for every sale to make sure that I know it's not slipping through the crack. And a lot of that does fall on my assistant. I have to be honest. I have the privilege of working with somebody that keeps me a lot more organized than I would on my own. And that is, I think processes are as important as anything, because if you know when somebody's birthday is and you ignore it, then I thought I was getting special to you. But if you show just a simple hello, phone call, card, all of a sudden somebody understands, hey, I'm still on their radar. I'm still part of their situation. And it's tough to not have that process. So everything for me, as soon as somebody comes in, is lined out all the way down. It's created right away. And hopefully we get them by the fourth opportunity. But if we don't, then that's where we are still hoping that we will work with them, but we will let them do their own thing and talk to them on a 6-week basis, and then down to a 6 month, and then down to a year. But I have a way of letting them off the hook as well.
Right, right. In your industry where you're managing wealth, which is very important to your clients, I mean, it has to be a single, stressful event for anybody that's, wanting to reach that portion of their life where they want to retire and they have a lot of money built up and they want your advice. What typically stalls a deal with your clients?
If I was meeting people, a lot of times it's price point, right? You're gonna provide a different service than you're gonna get from like a Charles Schwab, where or different brokerage firm. I won't name any names. Sorry, Charles
Right.
Schwab. They do a great job, but they different than what I do, and we charge more. And so price point is one where I'm often have to explain the costs and who's getting paid and how everything works. And people are always confused about how the financial industry payment structure works, who's getting paid and what and when. And just it's nice to explain that to people. But when you do explain that to people and you show them exactly and you line it out, and you're sitting on $1.4 million and you line out all these costs, all of a sudden people it's a legitimate cost. And I could certainly understand any hesitation. But then that's what the services cost. That's the business. So how do you overcome that? And sometimes you just can't. Sometimes the price point is too much for some people, and you just hope that it's not. But most of the time, what you find is when you can provide that value, right? You have to have a value statement that will tell you and tell your clients exactly what is in it for them. I think that's the most important thing, right? In sales, you must
Right.
tell what's in it for you. Here's what's in it for you, and then here's what's in it for me, and it's a fair deal. And when you can put the word fair between people, I believe you get a head nod most of the time. Well, doesn't that
Yeah.
sound fair?
Absolutely. And I think anytime you're in that scenario, price is always going to be an issue. We always try to avoid it. We don't want to get caught in that commodity trap up price. But you're in a industry much like ours, very, very competitive.
Mm-hmm.
And you have some great competitors out there. You do, I do. There's a lot of great competitors. But there's an ingredient to Bob
Mm-hmm.
that separates you from all your competitors. What is that ingredient you think that you do really well?
It's just personal preference, I think, a lot of times. There are people that just flat out, Pat, that's a difference in your industry. It's tough because if the person at the big company that you need on your sales route isn't going to give you business because they don't like you personally, then your company needs to send in a different salesperson, right?
Right.
That's a like done deal. Well, in my business, if they don't like me personally, they can choose another person that's doing the same role as me and go with them personally and like them more. And that does really, because we have been more commoditized with the computer age, the
Right.
commoditization of our industry, the fee compression, the costs, everything has changed so much that we are competing with another good guy down the street that I'm not going to say anything negative about. And that's where I think the big problem is with personal relationship type business is that when your person might not be doing the best job for you, and I'm not going to tear him down because you talk about how much you love him and he's
Right.
not doing that great a job. So that's a fine line for me, is having to explain. Sometimes if I see a portfolio that's being managed poorly, I have to kind of, hey, look, here's how this could be managed differently and how I would have been doing it and how it could have been structured. And you worry about that because you're kind of knocking what they've done, decisions they've made. You almost are telling them that their decisions have been not proper decisions over the years. And I hate that. People do not like to hear that they've been making bad decisions. So that's where when if we're getting blowback, I'm interviewing 3 or 4 people. I generally feel like I am going to earn that business, but
Right.
you you never know. And it just, if they like somebody else better, somebody else had a different message, had a different investment strategy. There's a lot of different factors, but I think that in sales, you just have to be able to next. Who's next?
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
you got to move on. You short-term memory.
Exactly. And the many years that you spent as a seller, as entrepreneur in your company, what would you have done differently? What did you learn today that you would have wish you had back 20 years ago?
Oh my goodness. That list is long, long, long. But I think that I would have been more active. I would have been more active in sales. When we were starting out in the technology industry, technology would break and I wouldn't sell for those 3 days while we were fixing it. Well, because I couldn't give a
Right.
demonstration. If the internet was down and not working, I couldn't give a demonstration to people I was presenting to. And so I always wanted to be at my best and be able to say honestly, yes, we're working great. But if I could do it all over, the biggest thing would be activity. If you're not active all day, every day, taking advantage of the sunlight, then you're not going to be as successful as you can be. And that is a huge difference now in a different industry where I have to be active, I have to be present, I have to be there for my clients. You really see the activity level slow down, you see the business slow down. You see the activity level pick up, you see the business pick up. And it's just that easy a correlation. So if I was just to keep it easy for a young person in sales, activity wins.
Well said. Activity wins. You have to be active. You have to constantly improve yourself, improve upon, refresh, rebrand yourself. And that's always critical. And a lot of times as salespeople, we don't do that. We don't recognize that. And for selling, you have to make sure that you're always constantly being active, staying in front of the customer and doing what it takes.
I mean, how many
Bob,
times, Pat, in your career has the last phone call been the one?
yeah, yeah,
How
yeah,
many times has the
yeah.
last phone call been the one? It happens. Make that next phone call.
Make that next phone call. Great conversation today, Bob. I appreciate it. Where can people go to follow or connect with you?
Bob McMahon. I'm at Edward Jones. Anybody can reach me through the internet or at bob.mcmahon at edwardjones.com. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.